Hello YouTubers, welcome to my channel, and for subs, welcome back. Today I'm going to be covering the MSI WS60 mobile workstation. I opted to get the top line model, which features a 3K screen. That's a 2880 by 1620 resolution featuring a 16:9 ratio. Covering off on the ports on the side of the laptop, on the left hand side you have your microphone port, a headphone jack, and two USB 3.0 ports that, unlike previous models, at least the recent ones, you can charge off of any of these ports. This is controlled through the BIOS, and you could tell it that you only wanted to charge with the AC adapter plugged in or with the AC adapter or battery mode. The reason why you could enable or disable that is because in battery mode, I don't think there's a low voltage protection, so it will actually continue to discharge the battery if you have a device plugged in here. Finishing off the left side, you have the Kensington lock port as well as the vent ports. On the back there is nothing. It's very minimalistic, just ports for vents. And on the right side of the laptop, going from the front to the back, you have another USB 3.0 port, a SDXC port, HDMI, Thunderbolt 2. Now this is pretty cool, although I don't have any device that could run off of it yet, but this can run at a rate of 20 gigabits per second. By comparison, USB 3.0 maxes out at 5 gigabits. And the original Thunderbolt port, I think, was like 10 gigabits, so it's double the bandwidth, so very fast transfer of files if you had a suitable device. Although at this point, I think they're still quite costly. I think something like a 4 terabyte drive runs in the neighborhood of $300, so not quite for me yet. So for now, I'll make do with the 3.0 port. Last but not least, you have your RJ45 jack, your Ethernet, which is 1 gigabit. And finally, there's that tiny little hole there, which is a reset pin. And last but not least, additional ventilation ports. On the bottom of the WS60, you have two ports in the front of the laptop that is made for the audio. So one there, one on the right, and then last but not least, you got more ventilation ports all over the place. A quick note on the SD port is that if you insert a card, it will still remain sticking out. I presume to make it easy to eject. However, though, it may be a potential problem if, like, say, you like to leave in the car for whatever reason and you pack into a particularly tight case. It may potentially bend or damage the SD card. So I would have preferred if it had been able to insert all the way and then have a detent here so that your thumb can press it in fully to eject and, install it. The front of the laptop doesn't feature any ports, but rather a bevy of LEDs that indicate from left to right the sleep state, disk activity, the numlock, caps lock, Bluetooth functionality, Wi-Fi link, and last but not least your battery / state of charge. In terms of, like, say, the position, I really wish that at least the cap lock key, which is frequently used, at least for me, would have been on top of the keyboard area versus here, because pretty much as you're typing, your right arm would be blocking this particular LED, and I just find it useful to know whether or not I have my cap locks on, especially as I'm typing in passwords, rather than having to move my hand away. And then actually, given that it is all the way at the front here, you would have to kind of sit back or lean back to see whether or not the cap locks key is on or not. Subjectively, it's a very nice looking laptop, very minimalistic design, and very svelte at 21 millimeters, which translates to just over 3/4 of inches thin. And all this technology is packed in a new magnesium shell, which incidentally is featured on Nikon's latest full-frame DSLR, the Nikon D750. So pretty much it has the same. As I read it, I believe it's a type of alloy that's also mixed in carbon fiber, so purportedly very strong. But we'll see how that holds up in the long run. Now, if you notice, I do have the protective wrapping cover still on, and the main reason for that is potentially I may look to sell it. Now, don't take that right off the bat as a dismissal of this laptop, because I guess I did not do my homework well enough in advance of before I made this purchase. Although I wouldn't quite call it a impulse purchase, because I was cross-shopping various workstations, right? The Dell PowerEdge, I think M3800, 4800, as well as the HP ZBook 1415. I think some of the Asus notebooks and potentially the Razer, as well as a few other ones. But bottom line, the main reason I settled on this laptop in particular was because of the Quadro K2100M with 2 gigabytes. With the main purpose, I'm not a gamer, so if you are a gamer and you're looking into this as a gaming review, sorry to disappoint you, that's not the case here. So probably best to look elsewhere. Plus, not to mention, if you do dive deeper into the video, you'll come to realize why. But again, back to the main point. The main selling point for me was to do video editing on the go, and I had thought at the time that it would work very well with Sony Vegas Pro, which is my main NLE tool. But turns out that Sony actually doesn't take advantage of the latest GPUs. Apparently, it stopped, I don't know, support for at least the MVC, AAC native support stopped a while back, but no fault to them because I think that that was a licensing issue where MVC got bought out or whatnot. But the main point though is that in terms of editing, it's okay. I mean, it's still pretty good. It's still a solid performer, but not quite what I had expected. So again, my fault. I didn't do my homework, so I can't blame the laptop. But let's actually dive into the features of this laptop now. So flipping open the lid, you do see that the WS60 features a full-size keypad. In terms of the tactile feedback, it's pretty good. It's pretty much like any laptop I've tried, although I gotta say in particular I'm biased to the ThinkPads because I guess I just grew up on that. So it just had this particular feedback that I really like, but again, totally subjective. One thing that does drive me crazy though about this keyboard is the position of this delete key right there. It just boggles my mind that a key, which at least for me, I almost never use the insert key. It'll probably be by accident if I ever press that key. Seriously, I just almost never use it. Again, that's just me, but perhaps it is useful for you. For me, I use the delete key far more frequently than the insert key. So I just feel personally it would have made much more sense to have the delete key to the left of the insert key and the insert key there. So basically these two keys swap. But again, that may be subjective, but I just personally feel that a majority of you probably would fall into the same category as me, using that delete key way more frequently than insert key. I just feel like it's much more naturally positioned, perhaps even with swapped out with the pause break, you know, on most other keyboards. But aside from that minor gripe, I mean, pretty much, you know, like I said, it does feel very good. It's responsive. It does also have, you know, various shortcut keys in conjunction with the function key. You control your brightness of the monitor here. You have your volume control there, again, in conjunction with the function key. And then these two keys here with the function key controls the LED backlit of the keyboard. You do also have one shortcut key here in the form of F4, P1. So you could program it to instantly launch any program that you select within the software shortcut manager. And just to emphasize the sveltness of this laptop, this is, like I said, really, really nice. Of course, subjective, but very thin. Like I said, I haven't tried other laptops recently, but you know, overall, very nice design, minimalistic, and again, very sexy and thin. Now, another minor nitpick that I would point out is that this screen doesn't run edge to edge, and this frame here is actually a little bit distracting at times, but again, not the end of the world. Sorry, I did forget to point out there is a webcam there as well. Okay, so now I'm going to dive into the touchpad for a little bit. So as I previously mentioned, overall it's very responsive, you know, pretty much on par with other touchpads I ever used. But one really cool feature that I like is it's enhanced the touchpad so that you could do multi-feature. So as you can see, I just zoomed in, you pinch to zoom back out. Okay, you could also scroll using two fingers. And then you could also use three fingers to swipe back and forth between, like, say, your previous tabs and whatnot. So overall, pretty cool. I've got the lights in order to demonstrate the KOM, that's the Keyboard LED Manager, that MSI includes as a piece of software. And this is software based because it's not embedded into the firmware. You actually need to load the customized software in order to run it. So during boot up, as you can see, it doesn't actually memorize the color that you had selected, the scheme. So it's only once the machine boots up into Windows that I'll remember, I guess it looks up a configuration file, then it'll switch over, as you can see right there. Let me cut the light to make that a little bit more obvious. One thing is that I felt it was a little bit counterintuitive is, as you can see, that's a function key on the left-hand side here in conjunction with your LED up and down backlit, I should say, right? So, however, though, the up is actually with the minus button, as you can see there, and then the down is with the plus button. So sometimes it's a little counterintuitive. I thought that they could have actually done it better. So here, this is interesting. This is actually one thing that I've noticed a few times now, for whatever reason it is. I keep saying that the color scheme needs to be changed because the computer is running slowly. So however, though, I noticed that once I switch that over to basic, my recording stops, so I'm gonna have to re-invoke that to make sure it is still recording. So I felt like that was a little bit counterintuitive, but in the end, not the end of the world. So I'm gonna cut the light in order for you to be able to see the backlit. I believe that there may actually be, I'm not sure exactly how many distinct levels. I think it's 4, but potentially it's less than that. Now, one thing you'll notice is that the LED manager software just closed out. That's one really annoying aspect that I don't like is if you shut off or even touch these LED keys up and down, that software will instantly close out. So that's the first level. That's the second level. And I believe there's actually 2 additional levels that it bumps up, but the last 2 levels are much more subtle than the first 2. The first 2 are pretty obvious. So like I said, the last, I think maybe even 5 levels are very subtle and not as obvious. So let me go ahead and relaunch that KOM software. All right, so as you can see here, it's broken apart into 3 sections for the keyboard. You have your left, center, and right. Each of these can be customized to a different color, but not just these, what is this, 7 primary colors here that you have. I mean primary as in over here, not the actual RGB, but you could pick one of these 7 colors. And then in addition to that, you could actually pick a shade within there. Now, whether your eyes can actually detect that on the keyboard itself, that's a different story. But so like you could go ahead and set your left to a dark purple, your right, your middle to orange, and then your right to a dark blue. And that, as you can see on the keyboard, unfortunately, it's not coming out as strongly, especially the red. The red's a little dull here on the video, but hopefully you could make that out a little bit. Now, in addition to this, you could actually pick one of their built-in kind of like algorithms, right? So you have a dual color, which will actually transition the entire keyboard between the 2 colors that you pick. So between red and green, let's just say, it'll constantly do that little wave thingy, as you can see there on the keyboard. And then you could do a wave, just like you would do at a baseball game or whatever. That will actually wave across the entire keyboard. Now this is going with the color scheme that I had previously picked, I believe. So that's your purple on the left, orange in the center, and blue on your right. You can make it breathe. That again goes by, I believe, the color that you had picked. So it kind of does this little pulsating thing as if you're taking a breath. Now audio is an interesting one. I'm actually going to go launch the Sound Blaster because I don't want any copyright issues with music that I'm recording into this video. So this is almost like an EQ in a way where, you know, it corresponds, not necessarily with a particular beat or anything, but it'll flash your keyboard accordingly. And then there's also a gaming profile. Again, I don't game, so don't really know the full details of that one. I'd imagine that it would probably sync up with the sounds of your game. And last but not least, back to normal again. This was what I originally started off with. There's also, I think, idle, like say if your computer was on standby, whatnot. Well, not standby, I guess if you're not touching it, after a while, you could change it to a different color, give you a visual cue, and then finally your standard. I don't know. I mean, for me personally, it's a little gimmicky. I think it's just a carryover because for all intents and purposes, the WS60 is nearly identical to the GS60, save for the video card. So I think it's really more of that. I personally don't find any use for it. I mean, the backlit is useful, but customization, okay, it's kind of cool, but in the end, you know, that's not the main reason I purchased this laptop for. I usually just keep it in yellow, so I'm boring. I'll just leave it at that. So, but anyway, if you're into that, hey, knock yourself out. It's pretty cool. I think one cool feature that they could have probably included that may actually be useful is, let's just say, if you had turned the volume down, you want a visual cue of something, you could program it to trigger on a certain event. So let's just say, I don't know, like your video finishes editing or something like that, and your keyboard starts flashing all different colors or whatever, it gives you a visual cue. I think that that would have been very cool, and I would have actually found useful and put it to use. The audio, sadly, is nothing to write home about. I mean, pretty much, I don't know, it's on par with the other laptops I've experienced. My friend did have one particular laptop, I forgot, I think it was an Asus or whatnot. It came with like a separate little subwoofer module, but even without it, it sounded pretty darn good. This one, again, not impressed. So case in point, I do have the Sound Blaster 2 running right now. Custom profile, surround at 50%, crystallizer at 50, bass at 50, and then small volume at 60. So I'm going to go ahead and come back here and just play the sample volume. Now this is at 100% max. The sound is being recorded on a Sony RX100. The stereo microphones are roughly just about 2 feet away from the laptop speakers there, so it's going to keep it equal. So now, case in point, I've got one of these cheapo speakers like USB. It also has a built-in radio. You could even plug in, I think, like a micro SD card there. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and play this for comparison purposes. Ouch. Yeah, I know. It's amazing. I mean, it's much louder. Bass got distorted, of course, but even so, what little you could hear was definitely a bit more than the standard laptop. So, bottom line is that if you are serious about audio, I would strongly recommend you get an external speaker. Of course, that does mean it's extra weight to carry on, but hey, if you're really that serious about your audio. Last but not least, just want to demonstrate this Noria speaker. Got it off on Amazon, I think one of the lightning deals for like 23 bucks or something like that. Pretty good speaker, although I gotta say, to date, I still like my Philips Shockbox. But anyway, for emphasis, I'm gonna go ahead and place it on the back of the screen and redo the test. Yeah, so bottom line, if you're really serious about your audio, either hook it up to your favorite cans or get a portable speaker. In terms of Bluetooth performance, I gotta say it's been a little flaky, especially with the use of headphones. Currently, I do have it connected to that same Noria speaker, and one thing I've noticed that the Cinema Sound Blaster, for whatever reason, will not recognize the device this way. It would still play out through the laptop speaker. And for whatever reason it is, even though I do have, like, say, the regular Windows sounds coming out through here, you know, it won't recognize it for some reason. So case in point, I'm going to go ahead and bring this screen there. And as you can see, I do have this set as a default device. I could test and play through it. And you can see the sound is coming out through here, but for whatever reason is, again, Cinema Sound Blaster doesn't support it. So if you do want all the features like surround and whatnot, you would have to hook it up through the headphone jack. If anyone knows different, by all means, please leave a comment and let me know. But so far, I haven't been able to get this to work with the Cinema Sound Blaster. Back to the topic of Bluetooth performance, with my best performing pair, which is these Jaybirds BlueBuds X, I found that it was just laggy and I had a lot of interference. So again, just tons of problems with the built-in Bluetooth. There's a high CPU usage alert for the screen capture, which I'm using Microsoft encoder for. But anyway, so I've tried all different kinds of headphones, but there's always a major lag. And even with the aptX adapter I plugged in, I don't know why, I just can't seem to get that running right. So I'll report back in the future about it. But so far, for your basic Bluetooth functionality, it's okay. But just note that so far, for me personally, I've been having some issues with it while connected to Bluetooth headsets. I've covered a bit so far, but this concludes part 1 of the review. I will be posting part 2 shortly, in which I'll cover the display as well as the various performance benchmarks I've achieved, so stay tuned for that. As part of FTC disclosure, none of the products used in this video were sponsored. Everything was purchased for my personal use. And again, I'm trying to build out my sub base, so please, if you like my videos and you want to see more of this, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks a lot.